Have you ever had your entire world turned upside down in a single moment? Have you ever experienced a truth so shocking it made you question everything you thought you knew about your life? Listen carefully to my story, because I need to know if you would have done the same thing in my position. Would you have opened that letter? Would you have confronted the past after all these years? My name is Margaret Wilson, and I'm 72 years old now. I've lived a good life, raised 3 wonderful children, enjoyed a successful career as a librarian, and now I have 5 beautiful grandchildren who bring me endless joy. I thought I'd seen it all, experienced all the major surprises life had to offer. But I was wrong, so very wrong. It all began 6 months ago at my granddaughter Lily's wedding. It was a perfect June day in Oak Ridge, Vermont, the kind of day every bride dreams of. Blue skies, gentle breeze, flowers in full bloom across the countryside estate we'd rented for the occasion. Lily looked absolutely radiant in her grandmother's restored wedding gown, my mother's dress that I had also worn on my wedding day 50 years earlier. I was sitting at my designated table during the reception, watching the young people dance, feeling that peculiar mixture of joy and melancholy that seems to come with age. My husband Robert had passed away 8 years ago, and moments like these always made me feel his absence more acutely. We should have been dancing together, his hand warm against the small of my back, whispering jokes about how much the world had changed since our own wedding day. My daughter Catherine slid into the chair beside me, champagne in hand. "Mom, are you doing okay? You look a little tired." "I'm fine, sweetheart," I assured her, patting her hand. Just taking it all in. Lily looks so beautiful. Robert would have been so proud. Catherine smiled, though I could see the same shadow of grief pass across her face at the mention of her father. He would have loved today. Probably would have embarrassed Lily with his dancing. We both laughed at that. Robert had been notorious for his enthusiastic but utterly graceless dancing. "I'm going to check on the caterers about bringing out the cake soon," Catherine said, squeezing my shoulder before she left. I was about to get up for another glass of water when I felt a presence beside me. Thinking it was another family member, I turned with a smile ready on my face. The smile froze as I looked up into a face I hadn't seen in over 50 years. Thomas Blackwood. He was older, of course. His once jet black hair was now silver white, his tall frame slightly stooped with age. But those eyes, those deep blue eyes that had once looked at me with such love, such passion, they were exactly the same. "Hello, Margaret," he said, his voice still carrying that slight southern drawl that had made my young heart race all those decades ago. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The noise of the reception seemed to fade away, as though someone had suddenly turned down the volume on the world. "I'm sorry to intrude on your family celebration," he continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "Your granddaughter is beautiful. Looks just like you did back then." "Thomas," I finally managed to whisper. My hands were trembling so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. "What are you doing here? How did you even know?" "I've kept track of you over the years," he said, and there was something in his voice. Regret? Longing? Not in a strange way, I promise. Just checking the local papers from time to time, seeing your name mentioned in library events, community programs. 1,000 questions raced through my mind. 50 years of questions. But before I could voice any of them, Thomas reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and withdrew an envelope, yellowed with age, the corners softened and frayed. "I've carried this with me for 50 years, Margaret," he said, placing it gently on the table between us. "I wrote it the day after you married Robert. I never had the courage to give it to you then. I'm not sure I have the right to give it to you now. But I'm 75 years old, and I recently had a health scare that made me realize Some things shouldn't be left unsaid, even if they're said too late. I stared at the envelope. My maiden name was written on it in Thomas's distinctive handwriting, Margaret Ann Jenkins. The ink faded, but still legible. "I'm staying at the Oak Ridge Inn through tomorrow," he said, standing up slowly. "Room 212. If you read this and want to talk, I'll be there." He hesitated, then added softly, "If I don't hear from you, I'll understand. You owe me nothing, Margaret, but I owed you this truth, at least before—" He didn't finish the sentence, but I understood, before it was too late. As quickly as he had appeared, Thomas walked away, moving carefully through the crowd of wedding guests who had no idea of the earthquake that had just occurred at table 7. I sat there, staring at the envelope, my past and present colliding with such force I could barely breathe. Thomas Blackwood, my first love, the man I had planned to marry before life took a dramatic turn. The man who had disappeared from my life without explanation 2 months before our wedding day, leaving me heartbroken and confused. The man who, in my darkest moments of grief and anger, I had told myself I hated. Mom? Who was that man? Catherine was back, looking concernedly at my pale face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." In many ways I had. "Just an old friend, dear," I managed to say, slipping the envelope into my handbag before she could notice it. "Someone I knew a very long time ago." The rest of the reception passed in a blur. I went through the motions, smiling for photographs, hugging Lily when she threw her bouquet, waving as the newlyweds departed for their honeymoon. But my mind was elsewhere, my thoughts consumed by the envelope burning a hole in my purse and the man who had delivered it. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed holding the unopened letter. My fingers traced my maiden name written in that once familiar handwriting. Opening this could change everything, or nothing. Did I want to know what Thomas had to say after all these years? Did it even matter anymore? Robert and I had shared 42 years of marriage. We'd built a beautiful life together, raised wonderful children. He had been a good husband, a loving father, my steadfast companion through life's joys and sorrows. I had loved him deeply and genuinely. Our marriage hadn't been perfect, no marriage is, but it had been real and true. Would reading this letter somehow dishonor that? Or would refusing to read it mean I was still running from my past, even at 72? With trembling fingers, I carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the pages inside. "My dearest Margaret," it began, and just seeing those words in his handwriting made my heart constrict painfully. "By the time you read this, if you ever do, you will be Mrs. Robert Wilson. The thought brings me both joy and unbearable pain. Joy because I know Robert loves you and will care for you as you deserve. Pain because I had once dreamed that role would be mine. I owe you an explanation for my disappearance, though I know no explanation can erase the hurt I caused you. 2 months before our planned wedding, I received a visit from your father. He showed me financial records indicating that my family's construction company was nearly bankrupt, a fact my father had hidden from me. Your father made me an offer. He would secretly bail out our company, saving my family from ruin and my father from disgrace. But on one condition: I had to leave town immediately and never contact you again. He convinced me that marrying into my family's financial troubles would destroy your future. He said he had already spoken with Robert, who had always loved you, and who could provide the stable, secure life you deserved. He made me believe I was being selfish to marry you when I had nothing to offer but uncertainty and potential hardship. I was 25, frightened of failing my family, and convinced by your father's arguments that leaving was my final act of love for you. So, I left without explanation, believing the pain of a clean break would be easier for you to overcome than the slow pain of watching me struggle to rebuild what my father had lost. I was a coward, Margaret. I should have told you the truth. I should have given you the choice. I have regretted that failure every day of my life. I moved to Seattle, worked tirelessly to rebuild our company, and eventually succeeded beyond anything I could have imagined. By the time I had established myself, 5 years had passed, and I learned you were happy with Robert, expecting your second child. I told myself it was too late to disrupt your life again. Perhaps it's still too late. Perhaps it's selfish of me to unburden my conscience now. But as the years pass and I face my own mortality, I find I cannot go to my grave with this truth untold. I have never stopped loving you, Margaret. Not for a single day. Whatever you decide after reading this, to speak with me, or to let the past remain in the past, please know that my deepest wish is for your happiness. It always has been. Yours, always, Thomas. I don't know how long I sat there, tears streaming down my face, the letter clutched in my hands. Memories I had locked away for decades came flooding back. Thomas and I walking along the river, making plans for our future. The devastation I felt when he disappeared without a word. My father's coincidental introduction to Robert just weeks later. My decision to marry Robert after a whirlwind courtship, partly from genuine affection, and partly from a desperate desire to mend my broken heart. My father, my own father, had engineered the entire thing, had made decisions about my life, my heart, my future, without ever consulting me, had robbed me of the agency to choose my own path. The realization sent waves of anger crashing through me. My father had been dead for 15 years, so I couldn't confront him, couldn't demand answers or explanations. The unfairness of it all was suffocating. But beneath the anger was a deeper, more complicated emotion. What if my father hadn't interfered? What kind of life would I have had with Thomas? Would we have weathered the financial difficulties together? Would we have been happy? Would I have my Catherine, my James, my Elizabeth, my 5 precious grandchildren? Every choice, every path taken or not taken, leads to a different life. The life I had lived with Robert had been filled with love and joy, despite the normal challenges and sorrows. Could I honestly say I regretted the path my life had taken, even knowing now that it had been manipulated by my father's interference? I spent a sleepless night wrestling with these questions, my emotions swinging wildly between shock, anger, grief, and confusion. By dawn, I was exhausted, but resolved. I needed to talk to Thomas. I needed to hear the rest of the story from him, directly. At 9 o'clock the next morning, I stood outside room 212 at the Oak Ridge Inn, my heart pounding as if I were still the 23-year-old girl who had once planned to spend her life with the man on the other side of this door. I knocked, and a moment later the door opened. Thomas looked surprised to see me, as if he hadn't really expected me to come. "Margaret," he said softly, "you read it." "I did," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "May I come in? I think we have a lot to talk about." He stepped aside, gesturing me into the modest hotel room. He had been packing, his suitcase open on the bed, clothes neatly folded inside. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me," he said, offering me the room's single armchair while he sat on the edge of the bed. After what my father did," I corrected, the anger flaring again. "Why didn't you tell me, Thomas? Why didn't you trust me enough to make my own decision?" He sighed heavily, running a hand through his silver hair in a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "I was young and scared, Margaret. Your father was intimidating, convincing. He made me believe I was doing the right thing for you by walking away." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "It's no excuse. I should have been stronger. I should have fought for us. It's the biggest regret of my life. Tell me about your life, I said, suddenly desperate to know about the parallel existence he had led while I was living mine. Your letter mentioned Seattle, rebuilding the company. Thomas nodded and began to tell me his story. After leaving our small town in Vermont, he had indeed moved to Seattle and thrown himself into work, determined to prove himself. He had started small, taking on renovation projects, gradually building a reputation for quality and reliability. A chance meeting with a tech industry pioneer in the early 80s had led to larger contracts designing and building innovative office spaces. By the 90s, his company had become one of the leading commercial construction firms on the West Coast. I married once, he admitted. Helen was kind and intelligent, a pediatrician. We had a good partnership, but... He hesitated. She always knew she didn't have all of my heart. We divorced after 12 years, remained friends until she passed away from breast cancer in 2007. His eyes held a distant sadness. We never had children. Another regret. And your health? I asked, remembering his comment about a recent scare. Prostate cancer, he said matter-of-factly. Caught it early, treatment went well, but it was a wake-up call. Made me realize I didn't want to die with this secret still between us. He leaned forward slightly. Margaret, I need you to know I didn't come here to disrupt your life or to ask anything of you. I just needed you to know the truth. I nodded slowly, processing everything. I had a good life with Robert, I said finally. He was a good man, a wonderful father. I loved him, Thomas. Truly loved him. I'm glad, Thomas said, and I could see he meant it. That's all I ever wanted for you. Happiness. But I can't help wondering, I continued, my voice catching, what might have been if we had made our own choices. I've wondered that every day for 50 years, he admitted quietly. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 5 decades of separate lives, of missed possibilities, hanging in the air between us. What happens now? I finally asked. Thomas smiled sadly. I go back to Seattle. You return to your life here. Nothing changes except perhaps we both have a little more peace, knowing the truth. Is that really what you want? I asked, surprising myself with the question. He looked at me for a long moment, those blue eyes still capable of seeing straight to my soul. What I want, he said carefully, is whatever brings you the most happiness, Margaret. That's all I've ever wanted. I found myself telling him about my life, about Catherine, James, and Elizabeth, about my career as a librarian, about losing Robert to heart failure 8 years ago. As I spoke, I realized how much I had missed simply talking with Thomas. There had always been an ease between us, a natural understanding that I had never found with anyone else, not even Robert. Would you... I hesitated, then gathered my courage. Would you like to have dinner with me tonight, before you leave? There's still so much to talk about. The smile that lit up his face made him look decades younger. I'd like that very much. That dinner turned into breakfast the next morning, which turned into Thomas extending his hotel stay for another week, which turned into daily walks through Oak Ridge, conversations that stretched for hours, discoveries of how we had both changed and how we had remained the same over 50 years. I introduced him to Catherine, who was initially suspicious, but warmed to him when she saw how he made me laugh in a way she hadn't seen since before her father died. James was more reserved, protective of his father's memory, but Elizabeth, always my most empathetic child, seemed to understand intuitively the complicated emotions involved. You deserve happiness, Mom, she told me over coffee. 3 weeks after the wedding. Dad would want that for you too. When Thomas finally had to return to Seattle for business, I felt his absence like a physical ache, We spoke on the phone every day, sometimes for hours. He sent me books he thought I'd enjoy, with handwritten notes tucked inside the covers. I sent him homemade cookies and photographs of my grandchildren. 2 months after Lily's wedding, Thomas asked me to visit him in Seattle. My first instinct was hesitation. I had never traveled so far alone, had rarely left Vermont at all. But then I thought about the courage it had taken him to come to the wedding, to finally deliver that letter after 50 years. Maybe it was time for me to be brave too. I spent 2 weeks in Seattle, letting Thomas show me his world, the company he had built, his favorite bookstores and cafes, the waterfront where he walked every morning. We fell into an easy rhythm together, as if our souls remembered the dance even if our bodies had aged. On my last night there, sitting on his terrace overlooking Puget Sound, Thomas took my hand. "I've been thinking, Margaret. I can run my company from anywhere now. Most of my work is done remotely anyway." My heart quickened. "What are you saying, Thomas?" "I'm saying, perhaps it's not too late for us. Not for the life we might have had at 23, but for a new life now. Together." His eyes searched mine. "Would you consider letting me move to Vermont, to be near you? We could take it slowly, see where it leads." I thought about my comfortable home in Oak Ridge, my children and grandchildren nearby, the community I had been part of for decades. And I thought about this man, this once and again love, and the extraordinary chance we had been given to rewrite the ending of our story. "I think," I said slowly, "that 50 years is long enough to take things slowly, don't you?" 3 months later, Thomas sold his Seattle penthouse and moved into a small house just down the street from mine in Oak Ridge. We decided not to live together immediately. Both of us needed to maintain some independence, to honor our separate lives, even as we began to intertwine them again. The adjustment wasn't always easy. My children had complex feelings about Thomas's presence in my life. There were awkward family dinners, difficult conversations, moments when the ghost of Robert seemed to fill the room. Thomas himself struggled, sometimes with feeling like an outsider in the close-knit community I had been part of for decades. But there were beautiful moments too. Thomas teaching my youngest grandson to build model airplanes, my granddaughter Lily asking him to help design the nursery for her expected baby. The 4 of us, Thomas, me, Catherine, and her husband, laughing together over board games on winter evenings. 6 months after Thomas moved to Vermont, we were having dinner at my house when he suddenly became serious. "Margaret, there's something I need to ask you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He pulled out a small velvet box, and my breath caught in my throat. "This isn't the ring I would have given you 50 years ago," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple silver band set with a small sapphire. "That ring is long gone, but this one represents who we are now. Not the young people with their whole lives ahead of them, but 2 people who have lived full lives separately and now choose to share whatever time we have left." He took my hand, his own slightly trembling. "I'm not asking you to forget Robert or the life you built with him. I would never ask that. I'm just asking if you might have room in your heart for a new chapter. With me." Tears filled my eyes as I looked at this man who had been my first love, who had carried his love for me through 50 years of separation, who had been brave enough to finally tell me the truth. "I'm 72 years old, Thomas," I said softly. "Is it ridiculous to feel like a blushing bride at my age?" His smile was radiant. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," I whispered. "It's always been yes." We were married in a simple ceremony in my backyard the following spring, surrounded by our blended families, my 3 children and 5 grandchildren, Thomas's cousins and their families, friends both old and new. Catherine walked me down the aisle. Lily's new baby girl, my first great-grandchild, slept peacefully in her father's arms throughout the ceremony. As we exchanged our vows, I couldn't help but reflect on the strange, winding path that had led us to this moment. The love of my youth, lost through deception and circumstances beyond our control. The 42 years with Robert, a different kind of love, but no less real, no less valuable. The 8 years of widowhood, when I had believed my romantic life was behind me. And now this unexpected new beginning, this second chance that neither of us had ever thought possible. It's been a year since our wedding day. Thomas and I now share my house in Oak Ridge. We've converted the basement into a workshop where he designs furniture, and I finally write the children's books I'd always dreamed of creating. We've traveled to places I never thought I'd see. The Grand Canyon, the California coast. Even a month-long trip to Italy that had been on my bucket list for decades. Last week, as we sat on our porch swing watching the sunset, Thomas took my hand and said, "Do you ever regret it? Finding out the truth so late in our lives? All those years we lost?" I thought carefully before answering. "I regret that my father took our choices away. I regret that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth back then." I squeezed his hand gently. "But I can't regret the life I had with Robert, or my children, or the person I became during those years. And maybe we needed to become these people to appreciate what we have now." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "We're different people than we would have been if we'd married at 23. Better people, I think," I said. "More grateful, more aware of how precious time is." He smiled, raising my hand to his lips. "Every morning I wake up next to you feels like a gift I never thought I'd have." So that's my story. A 50-year detour on the path to where I was, perhaps always meant to be. A letter delivered decades too late, but perhaps at exactly the right time. A second chance at 72. Some of my friends think I was foolish to upend my comfortable life for a man from my distant past. Others think it's romantic, like something from a movie. My son James still struggles sometimes with seeing another man in his father's place, though he's trying his best to understand. And so I ask you, did I do the right thing? In accepting Thomas back into my life, in choosing to begin again at an age when most people are settling into their established patterns, was I brave or foolish? If you were in my place, would you have opened that letter? Would you have given your heart a second chance, even knowing that at our age, the time we have left is limited? I don't know if there are right or wrong answers to these questions. All I know is that every night, when Thomas and I sit on our porch watching the Vermont stars come out, I feel a contentment I never expected to feel again. We talk about our day, about our plans for tomorrow, never taking for granted the precious gift of ordinary time together. Sometimes I think about that wedding day when Thomas appeared with his long-held letter, and I wonder what would have happened if he had never found the courage to attend, or if I had never found the courage to read what he wrote. How easily we might have missed this final chapter of our story. If there's anything I've learned from all of this, it's that it's never too late for truth, never too late for forgiveness, never too late for love, even when you think your story is finished. Life can surprise you with an unexpected new page. So I ask you again, what would you have done? Would you have been brave enough to open that letter from the past? And more importantly, would you have been brave enough to open your heart?